God kvöld, allesammans, og hjertelig velkommen til ordentlig hovedlitt og honaligt. Jeg synes ikke at det flere som har hodet møtt opp I kveld, og vi visste vel ta, og vi løtte etter touchpunkt her. Vi finner ikke valgt å øve seg, men vi vet at det bare konfirmasjoner, og at det hestferie. Og så det et mål som enskånd, så det var nok ting som kunne gjøre til at det ikke ble som en løkshødel vi 300 folk, men vi ordentlig glad for at de møtte her I kveld. Og vi rønner gjøre det så honaligt som mulig, at det nå helt skjer og ufylt. Så jeg skifter litt sindre midtelen til enska og det første. Ikke tog at jeg noe ørne I enskånd, men det var litt sindre enskånd også. And to you, Al Power and Jessica Luh Kim, a special welcome and thanks to you for coming the long way from America and Canada to Fyrilesturin to share your knowledge and your experience in the field of dementia. Very welcome. Yeah, that was just the beginning. Yeah, yes. Og så senter Al Power. Han særlakne og I eldrasjukon. Han har arbeidet nekv innenfor demensøkje, og han har også granska nekv innenfor seg samme økje. Han en altkjøva virkjenter undervisere og fyrilesturin. Han har undervist I demens og trivnað innenfor eldre økje og nærum Atlanheimen største. Og så han også utbyggven iten undervisere, og iten det en særstykke huksjon og tilgang innan demens. Og iten huksjon var verset av flere eldresrektorheimene I Førjon I begynnelsen av 2000. Og det kan Margaret fortelle meg om, hun sitter her I kveld. Hun har vært pioner innenfor det økje I Jokken. Men tyvärr det dottern I 4 største alle stedene trygg for I det. Men Al Power kommer å knyta til at syndropoi hvordan man hokser det inn I det. Og så hever han også utgivet 2 bøker om demens som omsettet til angst. Og den ene øyde demens berøvet og bedøvet, og hin øyde har det godt med demens. Det litt av båda barnen her ivre, og tekna hitch ut der, og man kan kjøpe der I rydderak. Fyrra boken her lyser han med annet hvordan en biomedicinsk áskoðan av demens og røykt har valgt, og som har haft visser at alt og nek folk ved demenssjukon vil vidgjørt vi åneion døyvande høylevei. Og I 17. bokene her legger han fram så ut på og på hvordan vi kunne skapa en nødja fætan av demens og skapa velvære og trivnað for å liva vid demens. Og så det høyte og evnen under her kvöld. Det noe som sier, vi tar lyst vi. Det hvørja ávirkan hever okkara áskoðan og fætan av demens av luftdiktene og trivnaden til følge vid demenssjukon og tar avværand. And in English, the topic of the evening is what influence does our view and perception of dementia have on the quality of life and well-being of people with dementia and their relatives. The last one. Her en praktiska kunning, og her sier at framløven teker av løy 45 minutter til en times tog. Og så vil Al Power så øyelig gjerne hava at vi får høve til å sette spurningar og vente tanken og áskoðan. Det damer hun øyelig vel, så jeg håper at det som vil sette spurningar og komme vi forskjellige tanken og I malen og hva man sier vi. Til mulig å sette spurningene av førskånd, og så vil det omsette til engst. Og vi får en omsett svære atter tilførest. Og framløven jo en skånd som vi har sagt, men vi har så omsett alle sleitene til dangst, til litt bornen, og vi har også flere øyntøk hvis de vil ha det. Det sier at de har flott rundt på akkurat sleit nu, så det rettjefylkene er kanskje ikke 100%, men nok så vel, det som det er. Og så er det kaffe og te av bornen, og mjølk er som om bornen, og kanskje ikke ødlån, men hvis de bare kanskje døylast og hygger seg rundt om, så må det flytta det etter mjølkene hvis jeg ikke mangler det. Og så tar jeg noen mynd, kanskje inn i midtelen, og vi tar også opp på sjønvideo, altså video, framlånar, og etter så det kan lettast ut av heimasiden til Alzheimer fjellanaktarna. So in English again, I look forward to an exciting presentation and hope we will have a good and rewarding evening. I have been giving a short introduction of you, Al, in Faris, and now I am very happy to say welcome to you, Al Power and Jessica Luh Kim. They will both do the presentation, and I will hand you the floor in the word. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Nina, and thank you for having me here. This is my first visit to the Faroe Islands, and I'm thrilled to be here. Jessica's first visit as well. Thanks to Hans Jakob. He's been taking us around and showing us the sights, and that has been very exciting. We've had some nice sunshine the past couple days. I'm sorry that I can't speak Faroese. I will try to do my best to make my English clear. If I'm going too fast, tell me. If you don't understand something, please let us know. We have people here who can translate as well. I don't speak Danish either. I did learn how to say "Jeg forstår ikke dansk" so that I could tell people that I don't speak Danish, and that got me through. But I can say tak, and tak for having me here. This is maybe a different talk than you might have heard from other medical professionals. And the reason it's different is because I was having trouble finding solutions with what I had been taught, and so I felt that I needed to try something different. So I think the title that Nina gave us was perfect because it really talks about, can the way we view dementia, the way we view people with dementia, actually affect our support and even their quality of life? And I'm going to try to make that argument that there are some different things we can see that may help people to live better. Just a quick history of where I am, how I got to the Faroe Islands tonight to speak with you over the past 40 years. That was not my plan. As the diagram shows, the top is what we try to do in our life, and the bottom is a better idea of where life actually goes. But it's been good. I started in private practice as a general practitioner in internal medicine. I thought that was going to be my whole career. But after 7 years in a very busy practice, I decided that I was too busy to have time for family, time for music and other activities, and I was offered a chance to work in a large care home in Rochester, New York, where I'm from, and decided to make a switch and became a geriatrician, and have done that since 1991. And became involved early on with several movements, several organizations in the U.S. who have worked on transforming care homes into less institutional places and more enlivening and holistic and engaging places to live and work. And I've listed some of them up there. All the way along, I've never been happy with the way we use certain psychiatric drugs in people with dementia, particularly antipsychotic drugs. I never used a lot, and I always tried to avoid prescribing them when I could. But it was very hard for me to explain why. I just knew that they didn't seem to be doing what I wanted them to do. And it got to the point where I realized that if I was going to continue on this road, I had to find a better way of explaining myself and explaining to others maybe what we could do differently if we're not going to use these drugs. And that led to a 3-year process about 15 years ago of working on and creating my first book, which Christian Christensen so beautifully has translated into Danish, which is called Dementia Beyond Drugs, Changing the Culture of Care. That came out first in 2010, And it got some nice reviews. I didn't sell a lot of copies right away. But soon the media became interested in the over-medication of people with dementia. And there was a lot of attention from the news, a lot of attention from the government, asking care homes to reduce their use of drugs. And nobody knew how to do that, and they discovered that I was out there with a book, and I started getting invited to speak a lot more. And so I left my practice, and I've been over a decade now traveling around and speaking about different ways of looking at dementia. I love this quote by the French author Marcel Proust, which I used at the beginning of my book. The only true voyage of discovery would be not to visit strange lands, but to possess other eyes, to behold the universe through the eyes of another, of 100 others, to behold the 100 universes that each of them beholds, that each of them is. So when I talk about reframing or changing the way we look at dementia, what I'm saying is it's not that I've invented anything new. I do not deny the existence of brain disease. Brain disease is real. But what we've learned to do in this process is to look at the condition through those different eyes that Proust talked about and expand our view beyond the narrow structures, rules, and approaches. We emphasize the importance of learning from people living with the condition and trying to appreciate every person's unique perspective. And in doing so, we can not only find some new solutions, but it also leads us to challenge many of the long-held views that we've been taught, and you'll see some of those challenges tonight. So just a little basic information to make sure everybody is sort of on the same page. We know that dementia is not a specific disease, but it's what we call a syndrome. It's a collection of symptoms that can have different causes, but affects the same part of the body and has some similarities. And there are probably over 100 causes of dementia. But the one that we think occurs most commonly is the one we call Alzheimer's disease. It's not just memory loss. It's problems with several types of thinking. And not only measurable, but they have to be severe enough and permanent enough to interfere with daily life in order to be called dementia. In most people, it does progress over time, different speeds for different people. And ultimately, it can be related to the death of people eventually who have the condition. And there's currently no way to cure dementia, to reverse it, or to stop the progression. But there are many things we can do to help people live better. And that's our job. I'm not a drug researcher. Probably there are not many drug researchers in the audience. I think it's our job to try to find ways to help people live more fully. And that's what my talk is about. In my opinion, there are some things we still don't know about dementia. We certainly don't know the cause, and I say causes, plural, because I'm not sure that there's one cause. There are so many things going on in the brain that it's quite possible that with all the things we're exposed to during life, there may be a couple different ways we can get into the process of Alzheimer's. Is it truly a single disease? It certainly has certain findings, but even within that, we're seeing some different microscopic changes, more of one protein or another, depending on the person. I am still not convinced that reducing amyloid is beneficial, or what role it plays. Is it cause or is it effect? I am personally not particularly impressed by the new medications, not only their efficacy, but the cost and potential serious side effects. People who have some trouble with their cognitive function, who do not quite have dementia, are called mild cognitive impairment. 20 years ago, we thought that that was the prelude to Alzheimer's, that people would go on to get it. But now we know that many people never go on to get Alzheimer's. Some people with mild cognitive impairment actually go back to normal testing. That makes research on interventions very difficult. And I personally don't think that we should balance so much money toward finding a cure and ignore all the many risks that we could be helping people to reduce. I think that we have as much or more to gain by reducing the risk of dementia in our population than trying to find a pill to make it go away. I think we need to do both, but I think the balance is off. I think we spend more money on drugs relative to what we should be spending on reducing our risk. But the result of all these questions is that the brain is an incredibly complex organism. There may be as many as 100 trillion nerve connections, and people are complex too. And none of the information that I've gotten in my medical training tells me much about the individual person, about their strengths, or really tells me how to help people live better today. And that's my main goal, is to help people live better. And furthermore, if we view dementia too narrowly, only as disease and decline, it can actually have harmful effects on people who live with dementia. So what we're taught, the medical model of dementia, is that we have plaques and tangles in the brain for Alzheimer's, other changes for other types of dementia. We see the atrophy of the brain, how it loses material and volume over time. We have these types of diagrams of people losing parts of their brain. We have the stages that show people going down and down and down, down, down. And I'm not saying that these things aren't true, but they are a very narrow view that only sees what's wrong with people, only sees them as diseased and declining and getting worse and worse. They're deficits. And when that's all you focus on, it has a lot of, as I said, negative effects. Some of the negative effects are here. First of all, there are some myths and some stigmas about dementia that many people in society have come to believe. And when you focus only on the negative aspects, those things actually get stronger. You see them more and you believe them more. We tend to talk about dementia care, but that doesn't really help us see individual people. We just put everybody together sometimes in the way we look at them. If people are not doing well, we ask, well, if we can't use an antipsychotic, what other pill can we use? So our idea is we're always looking for a pill to help people's well-being, and maybe the pill's not the best answer. I think we're very quick to disempower people, to take decisions away from them. And if we truly believe that dementia is all about decline, then we're more likely to take things away sooner. And we sometimes label people as having difficult behaviors. We even have a medical term for that, which I will talk about. So when people are upset, we blame it on the dementia. We say he's doing that because his dementia, his brain disease, is causing him to do that. And I'm going to challenge that quite a bit because that leads to a different approach that I've developed along the way. So stigmas. Stigmas, as you know, is like a mark of shame. And sometimes when people have a label like dementia, we just think negative things about them and assume that they're not capable. So a quick story about how real stigma is and how soon it starts. This is my late friend Ed Voris, who lived in San Francisco. Ed was diagnosed with Alzheimer's many years ago and wrote this book with a couple of colleagues of mine about his experience. And when Ed was first having symptoms, nobody saw them. Nobody came to him and said, you have a problem. He realized his brain was not working the way it should. So he would have more trouble remembering names or remembering titles or finding the words to say, more than he knew was normal. And he would have trouble sometimes finding his car after he parked it. And so he went to the doctor himself and he said, I'm having these problems. I think I should be tested. It turns out that the testing showed that he did have Alzheimer's disease. So Ed was, of course, concerned about this diagnosis. And he drove to a local Alzheimer's support organization and walked in the door and said, my name is Ed Voris. I've just been diagnosed with early stage Alzheimer's, and I'm here for some resources and some support. And the person said, where's your family? Where's your advocate? And he said, well, I'm here to advocate for myself. And the person said, I can't talk to you. Come back when you're with a family member. So that is how fast it can happen. Here's a guy with almost no symptoms who drove himself there, and yet he was not seen as somebody who was capable of getting information or making an appointment. So disempowerment happens very quickly. It's a very slippery slope. And I think that's why often people resist things like giving up driving, because they know that it's so quick that things will be taken away from them, that it may not be so much about driving as it is about just maintaining control and choice over your life. The biggest problem with stigma is it can lead to what I call self-fulfilling prophecies. Maybe you've heard this term or have a Faroese term for this. It means if we expect less from people, we don't give them the opportunity to do more, and then when they don't do more, it convinces us we were right, that they were incapable. We see this all the time in different areas of life, and we certainly see it with dementia. Kate Swaffer, my friend Kate, is from Australia. Kate was diagnosed at age 49 with dementia. And she was going to school part-time, working as a nurse, had teenage boys. And her doctor told her, you have a fatal disease, stop doing those things, go home and get your affairs in order. Now, once again, she was quite capable at that time, and all she got from the doctor was a very negative message. He even told her that she should go to an activity at a care home once a week to get used to it, which was pretty shocking for her. So one of the things she had was trouble speaking. Her form of dementia included some word-finding difficulties. But when she tried to get speech therapy, her insurance in Australia would not pay for it. If she'd had a stroke, they would have paid for it. But dementia was considered to be a disease that is not treatable by therapy. And so she couldn't get therapy. Fortunately for Kate, she had a neighbor who was a speech therapist. And her neighbor allowed her to come to her house and pay her for private therapy. As a result, Kate speaks all over the world. She's written books. She has spoken at the World Health Organization. She's spoken many times at Alzheimer's Disease International. And as a doctor, when I talk to her, I cannot hear any speaking problems. So once again, if we think people are incapable, look what happens. Look what could have happened to her if someone didn't have faith in her ability to improve with therapy. Was this the part where you're going to? I want to introduce my colleague, Jessica Luh Kim from Ontario, Canada. Jessica and I have worked together for many years in many different areas, but Jessica also works a lot with dementia. She helped lead the development of a course that won a national award in Canada for dementia education. And she has been with me on this trip sharing my seminars, and it's just been a wonderful experience, and she's made my presentations much better than they would be otherwise. And so I want to give you a little chance to meet her. The classes will meet her this week, but please welcome Jessica Luh Kim.
Thank you. Hello, good evening. Can I say Faroe Islands is beautiful. It's gorgeous, and we've had good weather the last 2 days, so it's made it even better. So as Al said, I'm from Canada. He's from the US. I'm from the Canada. You're wondering, how did we work together? Well, I convinced Al to come work in Canada. That's why we've known each other and worked with each other since, well, 2011. It's been a while. So I focused my education and career in the aging and healthcare field. And the reason why is because of my grandmothers and my grandfather. My grandmother lived with dementia and my grandfather lived with dementia. And one of my grandmothers worked in senior care. So my education was on gerontology and psychology. So I studied aging, I studied human behavior, and I studied a lot around dementia because it was very personal to me. Part of the work that I've done is working in collaboration, in partnership with people living with dementia in the local Alzheimer's Society, in the day program, through research, through working in the nursing home and retirement homes. And what I'll tell you is this. As Al said, there's a lot of myths and stereotypes and misunderstandings about dementia, and these are some of the common ones that are very harmful to people living with dementia. Number one, people with dementia cannot make decisions. False. People with dementia cannot learn or grow. That's also false. People with dementia become like children again and must parent our parents. That's false. People with dementia are fading away. That's also false. The last one I think is extremely harmful. I will tell you through my almost 20 years of working in the aging and healthcare field, and especially working closely with people living with dementia, they're still there. Their communication skills have changed. They might have gone more internal, but their humanness, their soul is still there, their spirit. So we want to share with you just a short video. One is interviewing a friend of Al Power, one of his greatest teachers, Dr. Richard Taylor. He was a person living with dementia. He was a psychologist in the US, and he would often share his own experiences living with dementia. And also in the video is a family member, Sarah Rowan. Unfortunately, both Richard and Sarah have passed away, but we're so happy we have this video footage of them. And so I'll just share with you the first clip of Richard, and then I'm going to ask you what you thought.
I think other people, and sometimes ourselves, see us as fading away. And in fact, they even call dementia the long goodbye. It's as if after the doctor gives you the diagnosis, he reaches in his drawer and pulls out his starting gun and shoots it off. And he says, okay, the long goodbye has started. And so I believe people don't come over to see as much as they used to. And they don't because who wants to come over and say goodbye every day, maybe for 10 years? I never said goodbye to you in the sense that I thought you were dying until you were diagnosed. I never said goodbye to you in the sense that you were half empty and tomorrow you'll be 48% or you'll be 52% empty. And the following day it'll be higher and higher and higher and higher. It's as if when we have dementia, the Alzheimer's type, for instance, Dr. Alzheimer's drills a little hole in the bottom of your head here, and your brains are leaking out. People say we're losing our minds. They mean that both in a mental health sense and almost in a physical sense, that we're half empty now and we're moving towards being empty. People say to us we're going to die twice. We're going to die as ourselves, and then we're going to die as somebody else that nobody knows. I don't think this helps anybody, seeing people as this way, thinking about them, and especially telling them with your eyes, telling them with your hugs, and telling them with behaviors that you used to perform and you don't anymore, because it's just so painful to see you fading away. I think it's at the root of most of the sadness, that most of the stress that's in the hearts of caregivers, because someone they love is fading away. They're dying right before their very eyes.
So that was Richard Taylor. What are your thoughts on what he had to share? Do you want to pass the mic around? Anybody willing to share? There's no right or wrong answers. Just curious to know what was your experience or what you took away from the video. We have a microphone there. How about, did you want to say something? No? Oh, don't be shy. We came all the way from Canada, U.S.
Hello.
Hi.
Yeah, it's just if nobody, to me, as being sitting on the sideline for a very long time, watching the work of the Faroese Alzheimer organization, I find it's like an eye opener, so that seeing things in a different way that we're used to. That's what I find, because I think I've never heard it described like that before, or the point of view like that. It kind of perhaps opens a third dimension in watching dementia.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Right here.
My wife is Alzheimer's, and she has absolutely not gone that way. More that way, maybe up.
Mm-hmm.
And she showed me how to see beauty in things, and flowers, and children. And it's very much alive. And she has had Alzheimer's for 10, 15 years, maybe, around there.
Thank you so much. Oh, it just gave me goosebumps. Yes, people living with dementia can teach us and show us so many different things. Anybody else want to share? It's not easy. I know it's not easy, especially if you're a family member. As I said, I had a grandmother and a grandfather who I was very close to who lived with dementia. And I worked with people living with dementia for years. And I watched them when they were first diagnosed to when they passed away. But I'll tell you, in the hundreds of interactions that I've had with people living with dementia, and even my own grandparents, I can tell you this. They're still there. They're just maybe very deep inside, and we just have to understand them and view dementia in a different way. So let us just share with you Sarah Rowan. She was a family member, and Al will just set up the video.
Thanks. Yeah, thank you both for your comments too. I think it's wonderful. There are a couple things I tell people that people with dementia do better than we do. And one of them you described, that they're better at being in the moment and present. And they see those little things that we may not notice because that's what they focus on. When you can't access the present or the past or the future as well, you are very anchored in the present. And it can be difficult, and it can be difficult as a family member because the relationship between you has changed, whether it be a spouse or a father or mother. Certainly the relationship, the roles within the family have changed because of the person's disability. So there is a lot that can cause difficulty, but this is really talking about how can we, in spite of that, find those ways to create these moments of joy and living well. Sarah Rowan, this is from a DVD collection that Richard and I made about 11 years ago, and there are many, many clips, and this is the second half of Sarah's video clip. So I just want to explain what some of this story means. She began by telling a story about taking her husband to a baseball game because he loved baseball, and she thought that maybe that would give him a moment of joy. And she took him to the baseball game, and they were watching the game, and he seemed to be having a good time. And she asked him what he thought of it, and he said, well, this is great, but next time I'd rather see baseball. So he hadn't actually realized that what he was attending was a baseball game, but she said he was having a good time. She said that sometimes we get so caught up in doing things that we think are important that we forget what the other person thinks is important. So you'll see her refer to that episode of the ball game in this clip, and I just wanted to tell you that before we start so that you can understand her.
Sometimes the little things in life don't matter if we can just celebrate the journey with them. So life with the diagnosis was sometimes bitter, but sometimes sweet. And one way that I remembered it, and I thought often about the quote that Gilbran said, that the deeper that sorrow carves into our being, the more joy we can contain. I didn't understand it then. I did not understand that sorrow and joy are so similar in their thoughts and so similar to your soul reacting to them. So every day at the end of the day, I just tear off a little piece of paper and I'd think about what was one thing today that was memorable that I don't want to forget. And I'd tear off a little piece of paper and I'd put it in a little cup, a chalice. And I'd just stick it in there without rhyme or reason. And before I know it, one cup was full. And then I started filling another cup. And sometimes I would go into the room and I would pick out a little scrap of paper that I had written on. And I'd say, oh, the ball came. No, it wasn't what I had hoped. It wasn't that it sparked a memory of joy. It was that he didn't know he had attended the game. But did it matter? Was it my disappointment or was it his? It didn't affect him. So I could not let things that did not affect him affect me. Because my joy was to love him through this. To love him through this. And he taught me more in that journey than perhaps he could have taught me when he was a professor. He taught me patience. He taught me deeper understanding of sorrow and pain. He taught me joy. That two people whose lives could be so altered could still be filled with joy and hope and thanksgiving.
Any thoughts about what Sarah had to share? Again, it's not easy being a family member and living, being so close to someone living with dementia. But if we can change the way that we understand dementia and the way that we view the relationship, it can help. So I have, as I said, done a lot of work in partnership with people living with dementia and research. But Stephen Sabat, he is an amazing researcher from the US, and he worked very closely with people who were in the later part of their journey with dementia. And through his work, he discovered that people living with dementia, even in the advanced part of their journey, experienced pride and wanted to maintain their dignity. They also experience shame and embarrassment just like us. They want to and still feel a lot of concern for other people. They communicate, just maybe in different ways. And they might need a little bit of help and more understanding from us in terms of what they're communicating and expressing. They still have pride and self-esteem and want to maintain it. And many people still retained a deep connection with spirituality. Other things that people living with dementia can do, even if they have a lot of cognitive changes, as you can see on screen, include learn new information. Some of the people that I have worked with have taught me new things. In fact, one of the teachers, the best teacher, Brenda Hunem, was a person living with Alzheimer's disease. She picked up wood carving. She picked up piano. Mary Beth learned new things like history. You met Kate Swaffer. She continued doing her schooling and education. People living with dementia can access memories and language. They just might need a different type of stimuli. If you go on YouTube, you can look up the video Alive Inside, and you'll see how music can stimulate memories. And in fact, there's a video clip that will share with you at the end of Henry, who is a person living with dementia, and he was listening to very personalized music. And after listening to that music, he was able to speak and express his feelings. Read a book to a child. My grandmother was really good at reading to me. Sing and play music. Again, music has a lot of emotional memories. And so you'll find a lot of people living with dementia can still maintain memories of songs, especially songs that were deeply meaningful to them. Create art. I have worked with a number of people living with dementia, even in the advanced part of their journey, to do art pieces. They just need a little bit of help. So we actually worked with artists, we provided the supplies, and we invited them to do the art. And we created some really beautiful pieces. Teach a recipe. Create stories. Again, it's just us as the care partners in finding different ways in how to tap into those remaining abilities. Some of the greatest teachers that I've had, and Al will say this too, is people living with dementia. People living with dementia can teach us what it's like. You know, there's a real misunderstanding that healthcare professionals have studied dementia and all the causes leading to dementia, but we aren't living with dementia. People living with dementia can tell us and teach us more than what we can study and research into. People living with dementia can give input into care plans. I've worked in the nursing home and retirement field for quite some time, and too many times we see people turning to the family member or to other healthcare professionals for information about that person's care. Instead, we should be asking the individual. One of the dementia education programs that Al mentioned that I received a national award for, not me, the organization that I worked for. We had people living with dementia helping inform what we taught and what materials to include. People living with dementia can give input into design and renovations. In fact, I had people living with dementia review architectural designs, tour the buildings of the long-term care and retirement home, and even post-construction. They gave feedback on what was good and what wasn't good. People living with dementia can lead and engage in peer conversations, survey care homes. Our good friend Agnes Houston in Scotland, she actually goes and tours and surveys care homes and provides feedback to the operators. And they can participate in volunteerism and much, much more.
Thanks so much, Jessica. How are we doing with the English so far? Is the pace okay? All right, okay. Stop me if you have trouble, okay? So we've talked about the possibility of living better with dementia. And some may have experienced that, others maybe have not. And so we've talked about the concept, but let's talk about how we can get there. The first thing I'm going to do in order to get there is we do need to challenge this idea about people's behavior being a direct result of their disease. This is the common belief of the medical profession, the researchers, and so I'm going to show you a little different way of seeing that and see if that helps you. This is actually an ad from the 1960s from the US for the drug Thorazine. It was one of the original antipsychotic drugs. And as you can see, this is not a man with schizophrenia. This is an older man who they are implying had dementia. And they're suggesting that a drug could be used to control his agitation. It says tyrant in the house, okay, tyrant. Thorazine can control the agitated, belligerent, senile. So there's a lot of labeling there. There's a lot of negativity, and there's a lot of blaming his dementia for his behavior. So I'm going to ask you some questions to maybe have us look at ourselves and see what does the label of dementia do to the way we look at people. You and I may go for a walk. I see plenty of people walking around the Faroe Islands. We explore. We might get our watches or our Fitbits and do our steps. Or if we don't like something, we might get bored and get up and leave. But if people with dementia do those things, all of a sudden they get a label. We say they're wandering, or they're exit seeking, or they're eloping even, we say sometimes. If we are forced into other people's rhythms and schedules, we can get very physically restless. People with dementia, though, are called sundowning. We may go to the store and buy extra supplies. Maybe there's a storm coming. Maybe we just want to have more on hand. But people with dementia, when they get extra things, are called hoarding. You and I can get sad, angry, anxious, or frustrated. To us, that's normal human emotions. But it seems like people with dementia can't have any moods, or else they are having challenging behaviors. And you and I don't like being locked up or bossed around or touched by strangers. But often people with dementia are labeled as resistive, agitated, or aggressive. So the question I ask is dementia really the root cause, the primary cause of the person's actions? Now, the brain changes are very real. Some of the symptoms that cause people difficulty are things like retrieving information in memories, verbal communication, coping skills and social filters, planning and problem-solving skills. So as a result, the changes of dementia can modify how a person responds to a situation. But that's very different from saying that the brain disease is the primary cause. So for example, if you were being given a shower by somebody, you today without dementia, and the person were instructed to give you a shower and the water was too cold, you would probably say, hey, the water's too cold, or you might adjust the temperature. Unless you like cold showers. We met somebody in Denmark that likes to plunge into the sea and have those cold baths. But most of us would say, no, that's too cold. Now, a person with dementia whose coping and communication skills are affected might not do that. That person might scream or even strike out at you. So the dementia has affected how they respond to the situation. But the cause was not the dementia. The root cause was the cold water. And if you believe that this was a dementia-related behavior, you might give them a pill before the shower, you might give them some nice music or a hand massage, but never turn the water up. Now that's a very simplistic example, but we can get into more complex situations around what we're going to talk about, the different aspects of well-being, and we can take that argument throughout many, many causes. So I think that when people are upset, often they have one of these 7 things going on. The biggest one may be that there are unmet needs that they can't communicate or challenges to their well-being, which we'll explain more. There may be sensory challenges, changes in the 5 senses that come with aging and dementia. It could be a new communication pathway. So maybe they can't say it the way they did, so they're expressing it a different way. It could be an expression of agency, an attempt to exert control in an environment where you feel like there is no control. It could just be a new way of interpreting and problem solving because you have memory deficits, and so you're figuring things out in a way that makes sense to you. It could be a response to a physical aspect of the environment or something going on in the relationship with the people around you. And it could be, as we saw on the last slide, a normal reaction considering the circumstances. But the thing about those 7 choices is that there will never be a pill or even a routine non-pharmacological approach that will necessarily help those. A few more challenging examples here. Trying to exit a living area is not abnormal. We do it every day. You all exited your homes to come here. What's abnormal is locking people in and not letting them leave. Resisting being undressed by someone you don't recognize is also not abnormal. We would do the same thing. Wanting to do things your way, at your pace, on your terms is not abnormal. And being angry if you've expressed a concern to someone and they either try to correct you, distract you, redirect you, or lie to you is also not abnormal. We would not want to be responded to that way. So once again, there are many things we're taught to do to support people with dementia that we may feel we have to do, but we have to understand that when they are distressed, it's because of the situation we created as much as it is the dementia. And if we feel somebody can't go outside on their own If they want to leave, we have to find a way to accommodate that because it's not normal to be locked up. None of us here would want to be locked up and never go outside if that were done to us. So moving forward, when I started my book, I thought, well, I need to get rid of just the negative, narrow view and come up with a much more holistic definition of dementia. And this is the definition I came up with. Dementia is a shift in the way people experience the world around them. That's all. I'm just not experiencing the world the way I used to. It seems very simple, maybe a little bit fuzzy, inexact, but when I started thinking this way instead of the traditional medical way, I began seeing a bunch of new things. The first one I learned from Richard Taylor because he said this in a talk. He said, I am not dying of a fatal disease. I'm living with a cognitive disability, a chronic disability. So he moved the thinking from dying to living and from fatal disease to chronic disability. And when you think of disabilities, then you think of what can we do to accommodate people? If a person's in a wheelchair and there's a flight of stairs, they can't come in the building. So we build a ramp for them. But we don't build ramps for people with dementia. And I'm talking now about brain ramps. People with dementia's brains are changing, and we expect them to accommodate to our view of the world, our rhythms, our schedules, our staffing needs. And if they can't, we blame them instead of saying, why didn't we accommodate them just like we built a ramp for somebody with dementia? It led me to challenge how we interpret distress in many of our care practices. And it also changed expertise. The neurologists are the experts on dementia when you look at it from a medical standpoint. But neurologists don't know how to give people a shower, but we always call the neurologist or the specialist when somebody doesn't want a shower instead of getting the people who are closest to that person and that person to solve the issues. So seeing this, when you define dementia as changing experience, then the person with dementia and those closest to the person become the experts, and it's a different way of problem solving. So yes, that different ability mindset, it assumes, in disabilities, we assume capability. We don't assume incapability. We focus on people's retained or emerging strengths. And once again, we move to a type of ramps. And it creates an imperative to fulfill universal human needs and also brings issues of rights and inclusion to bear in the whole discussion. So focusing on strengths, do you want to do a bit more? I just noticed we're running up, it's 5 to 8. I think what I'd like to do is, I think rather than do the whole communication thing, maybe we'll offer to stop at that point. Yeah. But go ahead.
So 2 things that we want to really quickly cover is this. When we stop looking at people living with dementia and what they can no longer do, the deficits and declines, and focus on strengths, our view of people living with dementia will change. And so we believe, Al and I, that we need to focus on improving well-being. When we focus on a well-being approach, we look at things proactively, we look at a person's strengths, it fulfills universal needs. Every one of us wants to experience well-being, regardless of our age, our gender, our condition. Would you agree? Even people living with dementia have told us time and time again, please stop focusing on dementia, but focus on how you can support me to live well. And so when we focus on improving well-being, it doesn't matter what type of dementia, what supposed stage of dementia they have, or what their personal background is. So one framework that we'd like to share with you is this. This is actually from the Eden Alternative. It's an organization that's been really focused on changing the culture of aging. And they brought together some experts. And together they identified 7 domains that would help someone experience well-being. They include identity, so being well-known, who we are, a connection to our history, what makes us unique, connectedness, how we want to be connected to other people, how we want to be connected to our history, our possessions, maybe to spirituality or nature, like here, there's so much beautiful nature. Security, what do people need to feel safe, physically safe, emotionally safe? How is someone's dignity and privacy honored? Autonomy is focused on the freedom to make choice, to determine their life, what they want to do. Meaning, what's important to them, what they value, what's our purpose? Growth, how we can learn, evolve, and change, and joy. Everyone wants to experience joy. So this framework is something that we've been introducing, and Al writes in his book, especially not only his first book, but Dementia Beyond Disease. And it really teaches us to move beyond that very deficit, decline, and medical model of dementia. So really quickly, and then I'll turn it back to Al. Why use a well-being approach? Because it's universal. Everyone wants to live well. It doesn't matter if someone has a chronic illness or lives with dementia. They just need a little bit of help and support to experience well-being. Most carers, family caregivers like me, and people who've been working in the health profession, we've never learned about and focused on just well-being. And so we need to start doing that. Furthermore, many of the things that we do with good intent as family members or healthcare professionals often erode well-being. And the healthcare system, I don't know about here, but in Canada, often erodes a person's well-being. So as I would say, I believe much of the distress we see among people with dementia, the root cause is erosion or lack of well-being. It doesn't matter if the person lives at home, lives in a nursing home or retirement home. Al?
From this, and we're not going to go into this much today, but a lot of detail tomorrow and Tuesday with our workshops. From this, we came up with an approach to people who have distress when nothing seems to work, where instead of the usual things we're taught, we instead focus on those 7 domains of well-being, and we look at them as 7 drinking glasses. And we talk about the person and then say, well, based on what we know now, how full are those glasses? How much of a sense of identity do they have? How much connectedness? How much security? And when we do that, we usually find that several glasses are nearly empty because our care system has not identified the importance of strengthening these things. And so we use a rather different kind of approach. Instead of trying to, quote, fix the behavior, we put that aside and we just work on ways to fill those glasses. So how can we give that person more security all the time, on good days and bad days, with every encounter? How can we give them more autonomy, more meaning? And what we often find is for those people where nobody had a solution, when you start filling those glasses, you see the distress start to go away. So it's more than just reacting to people and calming them in the moment. It actually gets to the root cause and takes the distress away so it doesn't just occur again and again and again. It is about 8 o'clock. I have closing slides on just some examples of one way to help people with well-being, and that is some basic communication skills that I thought might be useful. We can take 10 minutes and go through those if you want. We can break for questions earlier. I'll stay as late as you need, but I don't want to outstay your ability. Would you like to hear more, or would you like to switch over to discussion? Up to you. You'll hear more. Okay. Can't get enough. All right. So an example of a ramp, in a way, I guess, is improving our communication skills. Remember, at the most basic level, good communication is empowerment. When we take the time to use our best communication skills, we are actually empowering people who have trouble communicating to better understand us and to better be understood by us. And so I think it's a very fundamental thing. And a lot of these things may seem very basic. You've probably heard them before. But I think it's important to repeat them because often a good or a bad interaction can be set up by the way we communicate. And so just some basic things, once again, that I'll remind you before we wrap up the formal part. First steps, of course, reestablish the relationship. That may not be necessary for someone in your family, but certainly for professional workers, when they come into someone's room, they should make sure the person knows who they are. Sit down, check with them for a moment. And you want to make sure that people are comfortable and can hear you and see you. So that means if they need a hearing aid, it should be in and turned on with the battery working. If they need to see you with eyeglasses, they should be available and clean. And if there are distracting noises like a television or radio, they should be turned down or off, because people with dementia will tell you that when there is background noise, they have much more trouble filtering out what you're saying. They can't distinguish foreground from background. And make sure people are comfortable too. If they have to twist or get in an awkward position to talk to you, they may give up. I believe that most encounters should begin with sitting down, even for a couple minutes. Sometimes care workers find that challenging because they often have to do a lot of tasks standing up. But it's not about spending an hour. It's about really connecting that way first. And I think there are 3 reasons to sit down. First of all, it does improve communication. If someone is looking at your face, if they can see you, hear you better, see your lips move, see your facial expressions, you have better communication. A second reason is if you're standing over somebody, there's a power imbalance there. It's like physically it appears that you are in charge. And particularly for people where choice and control is an issue, and they tend to be more resistive, the last thing you want to do is stand over them like you're trying to control them. The third reason to sit down is it gives another message, and that is, I have time for you. Often when you're standing up, the person doesn't know if you're about to walk away or not, and they need to be relaxed and open up and know that you are going to take the time to understand them. So it's a very simple message, sitting down. Mindfulness and presence are extremely important. I call it the eye of the hurricane. It's important that we get all that multitasking out of our heads and go and connect with the person and be totally present. People can often sense when we are distracted, and that may be enough to prevent them from expressing themselves. If they know that we are fully present and listening to them intently, we often get better communication. And then there's the part of communication which is not words. That's the body language. Albert Morabian did research on body language, and he said that if we have a conversation that has emotional content, only 7% of the message you get comes from the exact words I use. Another 38% is what he called paralinguistic. That's how I say the words, the way I modulate my voice, the way I sound when I say them. But over half, 55%, is nonverbal. It's my body language. It's my expressions. And so when people have trouble communicating, they become more attuned to body language. That's another thing I think people with dementia do better than us. They're very attuned to nonverbal communication. And often, if we're upset about something or if we're just not thinking, we may present people with body language that's different from what we're trying to say. And, standing like this or looking unhappy because maybe you've got a sick relative at home. We often can get people to have a negative reaction because they think we're angry with them or we don't like them or they don't hear the words because they just see the body language we're expressing. So I always say these might be nice people, but you might not want them to give you a shower on this particular day because they're expressing, although several people said, yeah, we want him to give us a shower. So I may have to change that picture. But unfortunately, when you carry that up to the person, you can get that reaction. We want to speak slowly and clearly, maybe reflect the pace of the person speaking. We don't want to talk down or patronize or speak to someone like they're dumb or like they're a child. Richard Taylor, early when I met him, he told me that he can have a conversation with somebody which is perfectly normal. And as soon as he mentions to them that he has Alzheimer's, he sees them change. Their face changes, their voice changes. They start talking to him like they pity him or like, you poor thing. And he said he can just see the change come over them. And so many people with dementia won't mention it right away because they want to be seen as a person before they start talking about their diagnosis. Being genuine. People who are hard of hearing, they have trouble with high pitches. If you don't want to shout at them, because shouting can actually be distressing when people have age-related hearing loss. But just slowing down and enunciating all those high-pitched consonants so people know where the words start and end, that can be very helpful. But try to speak to the person otherwise as you would any other person, not like they have a problem, because people sense that and react to it. Christine Bryden, who has now been living with a dementia diagnosis for 28 years, 1995. She has certainly had progression of disability, but she still does some speaking and writing. And she wrote many years ago, as we become more emotional and less cognitive, it's the way you talk to us, not what you say, that we will remember. We know the feeling, but we don't know the plot. Your smile, your laugh, and your touch are what we will connect with. And one thing I learned from Christine Bryden is she believes that people with dementia are making a journey from cognition into becoming more emotional beings. And one thing we found is that although people with dementia lose factual memories, emotional memories remain very strong. And often when people say things that don't make sense to us, they're more speaking in a way that's symbolic of an emotion than the actual fact. And so rather than trying to convince people that this is their home when they say, I want to go home, it's important to validate the emotion, the sense of loss, and then explore that in a non-directive way to find out what they're really missing about home. It may not be a building. It may be other qualities that are missing in their lives. Communication is a two-way street. So once again, that mindfulness, focusing on the person, having an open, accepting presence and thinking about our body language, and also pay attention to the person's body language or the emotional content of what they're saying, because once again, it may be more in their body language than it is in their words. Always validate feelings first in a non-judgmental way, because that's where people are connecting with you. And watch out for what I'm calling embodied expressions of choice. Often when people are expressing choices, they do it through their actions. And so what we might call a difficult behavior can really be seen as a person telling you what they've chosen. So if someone pushes their food away, they're telling you that they don't want it. If someone pushes you away while providing care, maybe they're telling us something about the way we're doing it. And if we step back and say, what is she teaching me about this interaction? How can I do it differently? We can often find different results. Giving people time to speak. We don't want to cut them off, but sometimes we can help them confirm understanding. We can rephrase questions to be sure that we understand, or to help people get unstuck when they can't find the words. And we can speak to the feelings rather than the facts. And one thing I've learned is what I call speaking like a sports interviewer. I found out in Denmark this isn't so much a problem, but certainly in the US and Canada, sports interviewers don't ask people questions. They just make statements. So, after a tough football game, my local Buffalo Bills down the road from Rochester just lost in London today in an exhibition game against Jacksonville football, American football. So, a sports interviewer might come up to the coach and say, well, coach, you had a bit of a rally there at the end, but you just fell short. And then hold the microphone out. And I always thought that was so silly because they didn't ask a question. But I realized that when someone's forgetful, that's actually a good way to talk to them. Because when you're forgetful, if we ask questions, then you have to supply answers. And answers could be right or wrong. You might draw a blank, and that's embarrassing. So sometimes when people are struggling to answer questions, it's better just to make statements. So we can just say, I heard you had the salmon for dinner last night. That must have been good. And then instead of saying, what did you have for dinner last night, which is a memory thing. So then the person can say, yes, it was delicious. I had potatoes with it too. Or they can say, no, I didn't have salmon. I had chicken. Or they can say, I like salmon. Or I used to be a fisherman and catch salmon. All those are right answers because we didn't make them supply information that could be right or wrong. So if you're having trouble with questions, try using statements instead. I've been requested to do a song too, so I guess that'll be the way I finish up. Richard was my greatest teacher. Richard, when he made that video, by the way, in 2012, he had been living with Alzheimer's for 13 years. So an amazing speaker, a great teacher, and actually died in 2015, not due to dementia, but because of cancer. But he and I traveled a lot. We gave talks together. And one day, when I was at his house a year before he died, and we were talking one Sunday morning, I asked him what his main message was that he was trying to get across at that point. And he thought about that, and he said that he was trying to help people, as Jessica said, see the humanness in people with dementia. And then he said something quite remarkable. He said, I believe that as people progress with dementia, their humanity increases. And that's kind of the opposite of what you might think, thanks very much. But his point was, I think that we have a lot of filters. We have societal roles that we step into. So I'm up here, I'm talking to you about dementia. I'm not acting, the way I am with my grandchildren or acting as different roles in society. With dementia, maybe we can't maintain all those different roles or even pretenses. But what is left is kind of the essence of who we are. As Jessica says, moving more internally. And as Christine Bryden says, that people with dementia are moving from cognition into emotion and finally becoming more spiritual beings. And so he felt that we need to recognize people's humanity because we will see it sometimes on display as people progress with dementia. So I was requested to do a song. I don't know if this was in the introduction from Nina, but I'm also a musician and studied jazz and classical composition at the Eastman School of Music when I was an undergraduate and in medical school. But then got my guitar and just started writing folk songs and playing those as well. And I wrote a song, I wrote an album actually about 20 years ago that's all songs about the aging experience. I only wrote a few of them. Most of them were by friends of mine or people I've met along the way who had written good songs about getting older. There are some silly ones, there are some serious ones. But there were a couple of missing topics I felt in the collection. And one of them was what I talked about, the idea that older people, maybe people living in a care home, would continue to have choice and control over their lives. And so I wrote a song about that. And through a series of accidents, it was heard by the folk trio Peter, Paul, and Mary, who performed it on tour for a while, back about 20 years ago. Sadly, they never recorded it because Mary got sick and eventually died from complications of cancer. She sang the vocal solo on the song. But I'll give you my version anyway, and I'll finish up with that, and then we'll hopefully have some nice discussion too. Better not clap until after I sing. Jess and I have been traveling in Europe now for 2.5 weeks, and I have not been singing. I've been talking a lot. So hopefully I can croak this out for you tonight. This song is called If You Don't Mind. I gaze out my window at the bright summer moon that shone on these eyes for 93 Junes, on a life that was golden with treasures to find. I've learned when to hold them or leave them behind. My reputation is surly at best. I won't let them tell me when to eat or get dressed, though it doesn't matter most of the time. You keep independence or you leave it behind. You call me each Wednesday to join in the game, and the cards are all shuffled, but the rules never change. Life's best when it's random, so if you don't mind, I'll sit in the garden and leave the card game behind. You tell me my sugar is running too high. You blame it on ice cream and strawberry pie. But each summer seems shorter, so if you don't mind, I'll savor its sweetness from time to time. I know you all love me, but it just isn't right to tell me you need me or that I have to fight. I've fought for a lifetime, so if you don't mind, I'll go on to glory and leave my burdens behind. I'll go on to glory and leave my burdens behind. Thank you very much. So Jessica and I would love to hear questions, comments, anything you'd like. We have plenty of time to talk. We have a microphone, so please feel free to ask us anything and we'll do our best.
De kan bare komme ved vimerskingen og spurningen. Så omkring spurning. Og de kan godt si en av førskolen, så kan de omsette.
You may ask in whatever language you like. We'll get interpretation so we understand.
Yes.
Don't worry about the words. We'll figure them out.
Well,
Hans, you have your hands up?
yeah.
Thank you, Hans, for starting the ball rolling every time.
Yes.
He picked us up from the airport, gave us a wonderful tour, and he's been our gracious host.
It's been very interesting, and again, on the sideline, from the sideline, I just think being with this because my wife has been active here for many years. But one thing which I often wonder is how do we feel the first alarm clock when people start, when the changes in the brain start? Is there anything we can do? Because very often we start getting upset or reacting in the wrong way. But how should we react and how should we be alert from the beginning? It's a very difficult question, I know that, but could be useful.
Yeah, this is why I've changed my framework of how I define dementia and how I describe it, because I think that if we put this kind of information into our basic education, start people on the right framework of thinking in this way, I think we can go a lot farther. Really focusing on well-being, focusing on the person and understanding the changes they're going through. Understanding also the feelings, the emotional feelings it's like to live with the diagnosis, which is not an easy thing to actually be told you have a condition like Alzheimer's and all that that implies. So I think that it's really important when I do my 2-day seminar, which I did in Denmark. It's a much longer, in-depth seminar. I don't start by talking about what is dementia. I start by talking about well-being because I want people to start the 2 days thinking in positive terms. And we'll get to what dementia is later, talk about symptoms and distress. But it's just a way of changing our mind to think about the strengths first, and then how can we use the strengths to help manage the difficulties. Do you want to say anything about
I think for people living with dementia, when they get upset, there's something definitely triggering them. And it's often up to us to find out what that trigger is, because maybe they're communicating in a different way. Maybe something happened throughout the day that has gotten to that point. We just need to do that discovery work. And as we said before, oftentimes it's because one or more of those domains of well-being have been impacted. Maybe they were touched by too many people that they didn't recognize. Maybe the ability to make decisions was taken away from them. In fact, oftentimes security and autonomy are usually the ones that are most impacted.
Yeah, the authors Bartlett and O'Connor talk a lot about the citizenship rights of people with dementia, and they say that often the greatest erosion of our choice and control are taken from us by people who are least intending to do harm, because we care about people, we want them safe, and so we sometimes tend to overstep. By overreact, like I'll decide that, I'll take care of you, don't worry. And we want to be caregivers, we want to care for the person, but we have to remember, as a saying I saw online the other day, everything you do for me, you take away from me. So we have to decide, how can we support people without removing all of their ability to also support themselves and to support us? How can we be open to people who are living with dementia continuing to care for us as well? Yes, thank you.
Yeah, I have my mom. I think it started like 15 years ago or something, and I think my older brother and I discovered that there were some changes years before we could get the doctors and stuff to take it seriously. We didn't feel they believed us, but the problem is she was like independent businesswoman, and we tried to help her, but she couldn't manage it, but she wouldn't stop. So we had like a practical problem. So what you told, of course, she had to, we feel we have to force her to make changes, and of course she reacts, and we totally understood that. So we waited probably too long, but then we had to take action because she'd go bankrupt. But what we tried is to make her change her life and use. We didn't want to force her, but we tried to make her use time for other stuff where she didn't sit in her shop and doing stuff but she wouldn't. Is that easier in the early stage to try to help them along, or is there anything we could do?
I don't know if it's easier or harder or what it is, but there are some things about your mother. She was a successful businesswoman, so that's part of her identity. She was somebody who was obviously in control of many things.
We totally understood that was actually her identity.
Yeah.
But she couldn't maintain it. So.
She lost that ability, but that is her identity, and that's what that's how she sees herself.
Yeah.
It's also very meaningful to her as well. So these are several aspects of well-being that she's trying desperately to maintain. And so a part of that, when you see people are making mistakes, is how can we work with them to keep them involved in decisions, but to give them the support they need. So rather than taking away, say, if she's not paying bills properly, instead of maybe taking away the bills and paying them, is there a way we can sit with her and say, listen, can I help you with the bills? Or maybe you can teach me how you pay the bills, so if anything ever happens, I can do it for you.
We did that for probably 5, 6, 7 years.
Yeah.
And she still wouldn't stop.
Yeah. It's and that means then that goes back to the choice and control in every little encounter. And once again, it seems weird. The big thing is the bill paying, but it may be that every little encounter she has is one where she's sort of being told what to do or where to go or being helped. And so finding more ways to engage her in being part of any activity, in contributing meaningfully, in helping us make decisions, asking her advice. Just lots of little things sometimes add up. And, it's hard to give an example for one person that I don't know. But these are the kinds of things.
What I reacted to is what you said, and the gentleman here said that they got more sensitive with other stuff. I didn't experience
everybody's different.
On the contrary, because she was the world's greatest grandmother. That also disappeared.
Yeah.
So like the
Yeah.
It was like this business thing took all of her time, and like we wanted her to maybe do more with all those other like abilities she had. We just couldn't.
Yeah.
Sometimes
people, even though it looks like they can do it, they have trouble doing it. Sometimes just having them be part of an environment, having them sort of brought in and included, but not asking too much or realizing when someone's struggling and saying, okay, that's not something we can push. But once again, it's a very individual thing, and it's very complicated. And that's why the well-being framework gives you 7 areas that you can work on. But I can't tell you how to work on those areas for any individual. You have to take the people you know and say, how can I help her have more choice? How can I help her do meaningful things? That didn't work. Let's try this. It's a lot of trial and error. Richard Taylor used to say, when people say to me, I've tried everything I can, I say, all I can tell you is you got to keep trying. It's there somewhere, and it can be really hard sometimes. I just worked with a musician friend whose mother had dementia, and she just would not go along with anything. And she had home aides, and she would fire them every week, and they'd come back and she'd fire them again. And sometimes it can be really challenging. All I know is that this approach works better than any other approach I've seen. It's not perfect. It doesn't stop dementia. It doesn't help people get better, but it can help them live better, and it can help us live better as care partners, I think.
But just one thing that you say that I recognize, that once the system recognized our problems, it's like all the help we got was medicine, and that didn't help.
Yeah.
So that part I liked about you.
Yeah, there's nothing that she was doing.
Actually, when they removed it again, she got better.
Yeah, there's nothing that your mother was doing that can really be helped by a pill. She can't give her the meaning, can't give her the control over her life or the ability to do things she couldn't do, unfortunately. And that's where the well-being approach has had a great deal of success with many people. Anything else you want to say?
I think we've heard time and time again that there are people living with dementia in the nursing homes that we worked at that just didn't want to do anything. But we were able to find one team member, or maybe 2, that developed a really strong connection with them. And when we found that team member and that person living with dementia trusted them, then they were much more willing to do things a little differently. So sometimes you might have just been the son, and you will always be the son. So no matter what you say, mom's always right, the son's not right, right? So she's exerting her identity as a mother and a career woman. And so maybe that's what it might have happened. You know, Richard Taylor taught us one very important thing. If you know one person living with dementia, you know one person living with dementia. Every one of us is unique. Every one person diagnosed with dementia is very unique.
I think that's a very important point. And then once again, the relationship may be a barrier. The same thing with my musician friend. She and her sister were daughters, and that's really hard sometimes because of that relationship. My daughter struggled with math when she was in school, and I'm very good at math, and I could not get her to see it. And I think a lot of it was because I was her father, and there's just this natural resistance. I'm not going to listen to what Dad says, when she was young. And so the relationship can create barriers sometimes too, and nothing you can do about that except to get reinforcements. I think Nina, do you have your hand up? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I'll say it. You hear me? Yeah.
Yeah.
I will say it in Faroese, and Luh will translate it. Trying to. Jeg husker I mån til vimerking til det som du akkurat lagt fram om mamma. Det nemlig at det det nærmeste, og til drøyne ser tingene. Men jeg tror det også nøye seg om at det skal være et nettverk rundt om. Og hvis det så professionell, om det hjemmehjelper, eller om det tilboð, eller noe annet som man i, at alle har det samme tilgångene. Og hugsa og på samma måte vi hesner tjej elementen som vi nu inne då jag tycker att tar man ensamadlor och man röjner och som det är inne så det relationen som östen spelar en kvinn, men hvis man så har en professionell runt om sig som øyne kunne bakke opp om det, og har du hesa tilgångene, så kanskje det har givet noe annet mulig.
Good point, Nana. She was saying that she thinks it's important to have a network around the person with dementia, because when you're a relative, you have a certain relationship to the people with dementia, and you're maybe trying, but the relation has an impact. And therefore it's important that the network, the people around and professionals have the same view on approach on helping this person and work together. Do you think that also? Or?
I absolutely, I agree 100%. And I think also what happens is when the burden falls too much on a couple people, family members, once again, it's not anybody's fault, but when you are burdened, sometimes you may not realize it, but your body language may also be kind of exacerbating the situation. And so it becomes a vicious circle. And the bigger network of support, the better for all of us, whatever we're dealing with. The more people we have that can weigh in or give us a little break, give us a rest so that we can, take care of ourselves. The well-being is for everybody. That means the people that support people with dementia need those 7 domains of well-being too. And sometimes we forget that. We're giving, and we get burned out. And then that burnout just makes things worse instead of better. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think I can. My father has dementia, and I know that because it's almost only my mother and I who are. He's also in a daycare 2 days a week, and of course my mother gets tired. She is there all the time, and it really helps that we have different approaches and we have different, hobbies or things we like. And my father loves music, I like music, my mother loves something else, and they connect in that way. So, as you say, a human being have different aspects and different, are unique. So you also need different people around you, I think.
One of those formats they use for those crazy wrestling shows is what they call tag team, where they have 2 people against 2 people and 2 guys wrestle. And when one guy gets in trouble, he kind of tags the other guy and he steps in and takes over. And there's a certain amount of that going on where really there's strength in numbers and giving people each a break. Other questions or comments? We are around if you want to talk as well, but anything else? Yeah? Oh, we got somebody. Okay, good.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. I would like to add, thank you for the performance. I have a mother.
If you can hold the mic, please, right up to your mouth.
My father passed away 5 years ago, and then I thought there's something wrong with my mother. And she was not diagnosed at that time. And so I got confused because I had to say things, the same thing, and I get confused. And then she got diagnosed, and then I thought I will do something. I don't know. So I tried to get some evening shifts in the elder center now to, for me, get a better understanding how elder people are. Not all of them are diagnosed with demens, but many of them have that same disease. And I will say I can understand very much of what you told us, but the time is not always to meet. You don't have time to sit there and meet them, each of them, how they are and where to find where they are. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's also frustrating as relatives and caregiver. And when I go, my mother is in
Yeah, nursing home, care home.
No, another nursing home now, and she is almost gone here. Yeah, so our C is she can speak, but I can't understand what she's saying. So when we only have 24 hours on a day, it could be very difficult to meet that people, because you have to use many time and many patience and sit there, and that's a dilemma for me.
Yeah.
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 Can you,
Yeah. You want to say something first? You want yeah, it's I think one thing I have to say, and certainly my experience in the U.S., is that when people live in the community, there are very few resources available to family members that you don't have to pay for a fair amount of money. It can become a very almost superhuman effort to care for somebody by yourself or with just a couple people, because you have to be there day and night. You have to be the spouse or the son or daughter, the doctor, the nurse, the social worker, the aide. It's very difficult. We don't have a system, at least in my country, that adequately supports people to provide care at home. And I think that that's an important thing we need to work on, because I think we're going to have to do it more as time goes on. Because as more people get dementia, we can't just build more care homes, because there will not be enough younger people to staff them. We have got to find community-based solutions for people. And that means more resources, more day programs, more home care available. This is what happens. And the truth is, what I've seen in the U.S. is that when people move to a care home, it's not their age and it's not how severe their dementia is. It's when they no longer have the resource in the community to stay there. That really, it's more of a social decision than a medical decision when people move into nursing homes. And I think that in society, we have got to look at better ways to understand how we can, as a community, support our aging population. It can't just fall on one family member, because we have 3 shifts of people in the nursing home that come and go and take care of people. You can't do that at home, and we need to find better support. I don't have all the answers.
Thank you for sharing that. You know, it really resonated with me, because right now my husband and I are supporting my father-in-law who has Parkinson's, and we think he probably is also changing in his cognition as well. And my husband and I live 1 hour away from my in-laws. But my mother-in-law is also caring for my brother-in-law, who lives with a developmental disability and requires 24/7 care as well. So we have to go twice a week at a minimum to help my father-in-law. And so I know time. We're thinking, and I have 2 kids. So I only have a certain amount of time that I have available to go and support my father-in-law. So I understand that. What I've learned, and it's hard, it's really hard, when we focus on how much time we have to give care and we want to rush things, then my father-in-law's, he even puts on the brakes even more. And so that's why we talked about slowing down. It's really difficult when you feel like you have to do this in a short amount of time. But when we slow down, and as Al says, sit down and actually slow down our actions and try to connect with my father-in-law, then he's more receptive to what we have to try to take care of or help him with. But as soon as we get there and we say to my father-in-law, we need to do this, and we try to rush it, our body language shows it, then he doesn't really want to go with our time, our flow. So that's why Al has said, when we can proactively slow our things down, connect, and show that we're really here to support you, then things do work.
I call it spending a little time at the beginning to save a lot of time later. And it does take, and it's not so much extra time, it's really as much how we do it. Once again, sitting down gives it an impression of time. It doesn't take longer to talk to somebody sitting, but the person has better connection and a better impression that you're spending time. So a lot of it is more how we do it than exactly how much time we spend doing it. And once again, nothing's perfect. These are all struggles and they're very real. I've just found that this attention to more of a well-being approach gets us a lot farther than what I've been taught in the past. And so we just ask that you maybe try incorporating some of these things into the care you provide and see if you get some results here or there. Other questions, comments? If not, we'll hang around in case you have any personal questions, but we certainly appreciate you having us here and have all your wonderful comments.
Maybe I can ask one?
Yeah, okay, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah,
please. Yeah. We got another, okay, good.
It's me again. Just one thing that I forgot is that to thank you very much for your performance.
Sure.
For the very emotional and touching song. I think everybody here was touched by it. And I've been stalking a bit about on the social media, and one thing I saw which reminds, or which in a way is the everything with the lecture, with this thing here, is what one of you were talking. You said words can be a tool of torture or an instrument of inspiration. I think it covers it all. Yeah, I read it in something you had. I think you was having a conversation.
Yeah, I quoted actually Sarah Roan from the video saying that.
Yeah,
in
I
my
think it's
book.
fantastic. That's all. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much.
Can I just ask you? I think that everything you have been saying here makes so much sense and is something we in the Alzheimer Association have been talking about. This approach to dementia, this view on the, don't call it sickness, but mental, disability area. But my question is, why is that view not more common out there, and also in professional care homes and institutions? Because I think it's you often experience that even caregivers who have worked with dementia for years don't have that kind of view. And it's really, really frustrating because as a relative, you almost automatically have that view. It just makes sense. It feels natural to look at it. So why isn't it more common?
I think that a lot of it's driven by the way the medical profession has approached dementia. I'm a doctor, but I think it also is common with the way other people feel too, who are professionals in the field in various ways. Alzheimer's is a scary disease. Nobody wants to live with Alzheimer's, and I think our tendency is to want to control things any way we can and to want to stop things from getting worse. Doctors have been trained to diagnose diseases and treat them to make them better. And this is the mindset we apply with pretty much everything we see. And with something as scary as dementia, that we just try even harder because we know how difficult it can be for people to live with the diagnosis. And once again, it's our mindset. It's what we're trained. If you see a problem, here's a treatment for it. And we kind of forget that there's more to life than pills, and that there are some things that there's no pill that strengthens well-being. And so we focus so much on the treatments that we forget the rest of life. And I think it's not that the treatments, that medical science is wrong. It's just, it's incomplete, but it takes over everything. We make it the answer to everything. And that's what we have to try to get away from. And I think that often researchers will play up the difficulties to get more funds. And so as a result, the negative ideas get even more magnified because that's how we get the public's attention. That's how we get donations. And so we need to tell a good story too. It's not all bad. It's not great, but it's not all bad. And nothing I've talked about tonight will stop or reverse dementia. Nothing will cure anybody. And yet I've had many stories from people who said that their loved one's life got better because they used some of these things than it would have otherwise. And it's about improving the quality of all the days, no matter how many days we have, improving the way we live through those days. And I think that's really the key. And I guess my greatest support has been the people I know with dementia, people like Richard and Kate, who believe that we should be doing these things more and who support this because they found it's helped them in their lives too. It can be tougher with people with more complex forms of dementia, but you can always get a little foothold no matter where people are. I think we can always try to make things a little bit better. That's all we can do. Yeah.
Ikke noe som brenner inn i nøkron, en sørste spurninger, et eller annet. No, I think.
Okay, well, thank you. Thanks, Jessica, for your help. Thank you, Nina, Sigrun, and everybody. Thanks, Hans, for the tours. And we're glad you're here. Thanks to the Alzheimer's Association and the board for your vision and your direction.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, yeah, sure.
This is better. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you very much for your great and very inspiring speech. And I think we are, when we are going from here, we are maybe our mindset, our view on people with dementia change, hopefully, a little bit. And tomorrow we are going to have a whole day seminar tomorrow and Tuesday with you, with staff here from Faroe Islands who work with people with dementia, about 120 people. So I think you will do some impact on them too. Thank you very much. Og så in Faroes. Stora takk for I kveld, og jeg håper virkelig at det finnes noe vi, og noe de kan bruke, og Østene kan skal føre videre ut I livet her I Førjen. Jeg har alltid vært øyelig spennende hvis vi kunne få arbeid ordentlig vi en brøyting faktisk I måten å huske om demenssjuke og folk som har demenssjuke på. Og jeg har alltid at jeg har lyst til øyelig vel I kveld, og særlig var et slide her som det visste lykke som at de folk som ikke har demenssjuke og vil gjøre noen ting, vi fører ut, eller vi roter opp, eller vi kjøper, eller vi gjør et eller annet, eller blir sindre og irritere, så kallar vi det noen ting. Og hvis det så folk som har demenssjuke som gjør egentlig det samme som vi gjør, så kallar man det noe annet. Så det enten aggressiv, eller utreagerende, eller trobel har vi å gjøre, og samstarv ikke, og det har sleit vært øyelig eller sigende, men det var nekko åndsleitøst. Så et av tre som jeg vil si av Arvid enda her I kveld, det at det som funnet bunkeren som stender her, han fikk slett presentere fra början av, men det gjør jeg nå, og kanskje det gløkker jeg har langt og se hva det for noe. Denne bunkeren en minnesbunker, stender overast. Den neste som stender til glømsk, men ikke glemt. Og så det en sånn QR-kode her som man kan skanne, og så kommer man inn, og man kan skanne det av telefonen, så kommer man inn og hjemme synet til Alzheimer-fellene. Og her kan man få nekva gode vitan og opplysninger om demens og demenssjuker. Og hver tilboð og tjenester I Førjen I det middelnavnet. Og ja. Ja, og hjemme så gjør henne, ja. Så hvis onkel hikker inn her, og at det ikke livet og det mangler, så det her, vi arbeider fullspøyd hvor jeg vet vi. Disse bankene meningen at de skulle stande rundt om I kommunen I Førjen. Vi har spurt nok snakket kommuner om de vil kjøpe en bank, og til aller fleste, de vil gjerne kjøpe en bank fra oss. Og det tekniske skole I Klaksvik som har gjort banken, og kjøpes, og snýr vi han østene. Og bøyene eller stedet som det suttja, det Alzheimers sløyfan. Og meningen altså, enda mal vi bunchen jo av varspa ljøs og demens og demenssjuker. Og i samfunnet i hele tiden. Og så østene at legge opp til at man kan sitte av bunchen og holde hoksa om liva og minnelige løter, men østene åpner opp for at tåsa om demens. Det stadigvæk nok så tabubelagt i førjon, at man ganska ringt ved sette årata, og det kan bankeren lette seg opp til at man kan sette seg her, og så kan man nemlig ta utgangspunkt i hva det for en banker, og så få sette årene noen ting, og dele noen livsøver. Så vi håper at det får være vel mottidget og i banken nå det ferdig i produksjon, kanskje nærmere 18 hestferiene. Så takk for i kveld, et sammen.